I'm a travel and landscape photographer based in Bangalore. I'm also the chief mentor and founder of a company called Good Shots Photography Private Limited, which is one of the leading photo education company in India. In my childhood, my dad was in the army. So every 2-3 years, we were in a transferable job and we would get transferred every 2-3 years. So traveling is something I've known all my life. And most of the places my dad was transferred to were usually not the cities and the towns. They were like tier B and tier C cities, which were almost in the outpost of jungles. So it's a life that I've lived and I've known all my life. As I got into the professional world after my education, I got into the roles which required me to travel as well. First, domestically in India, all across, from Kashmir to Kanyakumari, from Shillong and Guwahati, Tripura to all the way in Rajasthan. And then in the last 15 years of that corporate world, I was in the global roles. That took me around the globe, from Americas all the way down to Australia, and from Hong Kong all the way down to Europe and Africa and everywhere. So that's how the love for travel started to kind of blend into my love for photography, because traveling and photography kind of goes hand in hand. It's synonymous. So photography is an amazing art to express yourself. But I think somewhere more than that, as a photographer, photography is also an art to really express yourself and create a visual experience of what you feel, what you see, what you go through when you're in the journey of photography. So there are two ways to look at this. One is you're upon a scene and you are taken by the beauty of the place that you're in, or you are moved by a scene that is unfolding in front of you. And you can just capture that. But the other part is, while you're capturing it, there's a whole lot of emotions and feelings you're feeling inside of you as a photographer. A true sense to me of photography is not just capturing that image that you have seen with your eyes, but it's also to translate what you've felt and that your viewers are able to understand and empathize or get into the mood of feeling that. So to me, that's what really photography at the end of the day comes down to. It's how you express yourself through this media, but also convey the emotions that you're feeling inside as an artist. So when you talk about photography and travel photography, people usually think that travel photography is all about going to a place that you have usually not gone before to. And in my mind, that's more like a cliche touristy place that you've heard or you've seen your families or friends have gone to, but you haven't. And then you go intuitively and take pictures. Now, there's a lot of risk element in that if you look at from a purist point of photography, right? Because you haven't really conceptualized what you want to shoot. The other side, what you can expect, if you ask me what can you expect from the masterclass, is the fact that the major tenet of photography is really pinned around the part which is all about composition. Composition delves into how you tell stories through your photography. And the way I see this is that if you want to really tell compelling stories through your photography, then you need to really know the art of composing. That involves a whole lot of things that you need to be aware of. Things like what are the various elements that you want to use in a photography? What kind of rules do you want to talk about? When you want to translate a subject within your frame to your viewers, how do you want to guide their attention to the most important part of their frame? You want to understand how you want to work on the lights. You want to work on color theory or color balance or harmony or visual weight, all of those. So in my masterclass, I'm going to be talking some of those areas, some of the pointers, if you want to speak, which will help you to kind of be aware of the things that you need to be aware of while you're out there to photograph. The idea is that you go and take pictures of the places which either people have gone to but haven't shot it thus, or as you haven't seen them in that new avatar that you will shoot, or you go to a new place and show them things that they haven't seen yet. So in both of its form, it's important that you just don't go there and arrive and then take out your cameras or your smartphones and take pictures. It is really about approaching the whole photography with a very purposeful mindset. You want to know what you are there to do, and you go there and do that with a precise execution. The reason that I really resonated with the art of motorcycling was because Royal Enfield in its essence is all about exploration. It's about pushing boundaries. It's about going beyond. It's about going to places which haven't been charted before. And that's how I see photography in my life as well. It is not about, as I've discussed with my friends, it's not about going to Eiffel Tower and taking a picture of yourself in front of the Eiffel Tower, or going to a Brooklyn Bridge and taking a picture of yourself under the Brooklyn Bridge. It is about transporting your viewers and showing them, if it is a Brooklyn Bridge or an Eiffel Tower, in a way that they've never seen before. And it opens their eyes to the awareness, saying that, oh wow, this is the other perspective of these monuments, or these famous monuments. So Royal Enfield allows you to do that. It's not just about motorcycling, but it is about what you can do with the motorcycling, how you can unleash that wanderlust within your spirits and go pursue that. Okay, in my masterclass, I'm going to be talking about the various technical aspects of photography and how you can kind of tie that back into the artistic side of photography. One of the main tenets in photography is all about composition. It's about how you kind of tie all of that together, understanding the various elements that you can use to compose an image, how you can use various rules or not use the rules to guide the attention of your viewers to the most important part of your image, which is a subject. In my masterclass, I'll also talk about how do you really start to pick on these things like working on color theories, balancing the visual weight of an image, and then other areas which kind of delve and tracks back into understanding and expressing yourself through the art of photography. Inspiration is a very intangible concept. In its literal meaning, in its literal sense, what it means is to be stimulated enough to create something at your best. Now, the triggers to what stimulates you or what inspires you is a little hard to kind of pin down. Also, to sustain that high level of inspiration to create one after another consistently a piece of art that is at your best is going to be even more challenging. Now, to me, inspiration always kind of dovetails into a sense of purpose. Now, inspiration without a meaning is bound to lose its purpose sooner or later. You might be inspired to do something today because something motivates you to do that. But then how do you really sustain that? Now, if you want to seek an inspiration which overarches and kind of spreads across through your body of work, through your body of art, and sustains through your long phase of life, then it has to have a sense of purpose. In my mind, people who struggle with finding the real sense of inspiration are really struggling with finding a real sense of purpose. There has to be a purpose in your art. There has to be a purpose in your photography. There has to be a purpose in everything you do. And that, to me, is an important thing. So as long as you have a reason to do something and you do it at your best, then inspiration will motivate you to do something which is your best. Personally, for me, inspiration has been directly, the trigger for inspiration for me has been a sense of wanderlust. It's a sense of exploration. It all kind of comes back to a sense of going to places which I haven't gone before. Directly relates with my core area, which is travel. The way I see this is that there's so many beautiful places around the world to explore, to go to capture. And I have one lifetime to do that. And if you really bring it to the context, in terms of what you can do in a lifetime, given a good health and good spirit, you have very limited time to explore all that the world has to offer you. With that as a context, do you realize how motivated or how charged I am to go do that? For me, that's a motivation, that's a sense of purpose that's going to be there throughout for as long as I live. And that continues to drive me, that continues to push me, that continues to take me to the next chapter of my life. One of the examples that I can give you where I was really inspired to do something which directly relates with the sense of, what I call purpose, sense of exploration, is the only place in India which has all 4 seasons, and seasons are important to me as a photographer, is Kashmir. It has a very distinct winter with snow-clad mountains and snowfalls. It has a spring season when you have flower blooms, tulips, and a whole lot of other seasonal flowers. You have summer when the valley is lit with wildflowers like lupins and all kind of flowers. And then you have autumn, which is all about the reds and the oranges. So about 2-3 years ago, I wanted to go and capture Kashmir in all 4 seasons. Unfortunately, back then I was working in my corporate life, and I couldn't take the kind of time I wanted to or I needed to. But then finally, in 2020 and 2021, I made it a purpose to actually go back to Kashmir, in fact, not just 4, but 5 times, and I'm yet to go again, and then take photographs of Kashmir in all its 4 seasons. So I spent about 2 weeks in winter. I'm told temperatures were down to -15, -17 degrees, and it was freezing cold. We went back in March, April. I shot tulips, I shot other flowers. We went back in June, spent another about 3 weeks back then. And then I've gone back already to take a part of the autumn pictures, but I will again go back to complete that series. And that, the story that I have in my mind about when I think about Kashmir was to complete this whole book of all seasons in Kashmir. And the motivation there was to really do something that I had never done before. I think creative block is it's a very real thing. It's something that every artist has to go through. It comes back to what I was saying earlier, right? You need to know the triggers that motivate you. There could also be triggers that demotivate you, and you need to kind of isolate and understand them. You may not be able to fix them because, as I said before, these are very intangible things. So if it was so simple that you would know the exact switch to turn on or turn off, then everybody would be inspired all the time. But that's not the reality. But there are things that you can do to kind of bring that motivation back to yourselves again. So one of the things that I do in this lean phase when motivation is a challenge is to try and upskill myself. Now, photography, like any other art, is always evolving. There are more technologies, there are new technologies that come in. There are changes to the way that things have been done traditionally and the things that people do in the new times. So one of the things that I love doing the time when I find that I'm not motivated enough to really go out on the field and take pictures is to upskill myself. And there's a lot of things that I can do to upskill myself. So there are things around photography, there are things around the hardware, the camera, the lenses, trying out new technologies, new techniques. There are also things that I can try out and upskill myself in terms of post-processing, learning new software, learning new skill, learning new tool or technique. That's one. Second, I would say, is try and study the art of other artists or other photographers. Art or photography is a very contagious form of visual representation. When you see and surround yourself with the work of great artists and photographers, you are bound to be inspired to come back into the groove. Be mindful of the fact that you don't want to copy that. But what you do want to do is draw the inspiration from what you've done. So if you see a photographer who is trekking to a new destination and you see the stories that he's sharing about his hardships, his accomplishments, his final, the vanquish of the whole culmination of the journey, it will inspire you to come back into the groove. Third thing is you can make travel plans. Just go out and be out there. Sometimes the place itself inspires you. So you've been going through this dull moments because you've been staying at home, maybe working from home, maybe you've had too much of work pressure, there might be issues or problems around your family, health, or whatever. But just take time out. The objective is not to go and get a portrait done or a photography of a landscape done. What you do want to do is just go out, feel the place. Just make a travel plan, just pack up your bags and go out there. The objective is not to complete a task. The objective is to see how you respond to a beauty of a place. You might have been going through a mundane work from home routine for a very long time, or you might have had issues with family, friends, office, colleagues, whatever. When you pack your bag and go out there, see how you respond to the place, and sometimes it all comes back. Fourth, try photography projects. There are a whole lot of them. You can Google them out anytime you want. But these are projects like 365 project, where you take a picture a day for 365 days, and you don't miss them. You might go and capture, let's say, a black and white series of street near your home. It's a project that you're trying to do. You could try and take portraits of interesting or old people or kids in your apartment. So these kind of projects help you to stay in the groove and kind of get back into the whole motivation cycle of art and photography. So once you have the motivation and inspiration, the next step is to really create the artwork. For me, that's the process where I immerse myself into the whole whole process of creating the art. It's the way that I respond emotionally when I'm in a place. I try to focus on how that is making me feel. And that's what I want to translate into my photography. So for example, if I'm in a place, let's say it's a mountain with a lot of mists and fog, it gives me a sense of calmness. It gives me a sense of peace. Now that's what I want to really capture. If I'm in a place which has a lot of vibrant colors, it brings the energy out of me, then I'm going to be focusing on that and then how to really put it back into my photography. So that's the process and how it goes through. The way I do that is I call it pre-visualization. Now, if you are not set out with an objective right up front in saying what is that you want to capture and how, then you most probably won't be able to walk away with something which you're satisfied with. I'll give you an example. Let's take an example where you want to take 2 days out and go and photograph Taj Mahal in Agra. Now, it's a monument which has been shot 1,000,000 times over by thousands of photographers. If you don't know right up front how do you want to shoot Taj Mahal, then you're just going to go there, take those cliched pictures of Taj Mahal and come back. Those pictures are not going to stand out in social media. It's not going to stand out in your body of work. It's just going to be an average picture. So that's where the whole pre-visualization bit comes in. It's the part where you work upon creating a storyboard of an idea of what is that you would like to do and how. I don't think it's important to have that pre-visualization and the story nailed for each and every frame. As long as you have that for a story that runs through your entire journey of that bit, like when you're in Taj Mahal or you're in Agra, for those 2 days, what is it you would like to do, then it works fine. So how do I connect the vision into the photograph? I'll give you an example. I had made a recent plan to go to Zanskar in Ladakh, in Kargil, and it was a 7-day trip that I had planned. The vision that I had to begin with was to capture and photograph as many monasteries as possible in that area. And there are a lot of them. In my mind, there are close to about 12 to 14 of them. And that's what I set out to do. Now, in the process, of course, there were landscapes that I shot, there were waterfalls that I shot, there were other beautiful places along the way that I photographed. But what I really set out to do was to ensure that I capture and photograph all the monasteries. So I planned the shoot in such a way that I researched into looking at which monasteries were facing east ways, which were facing west ways, so that I could plan my sunsets and sunrise. I would be in this spot at least 30 minutes to an hour before my actual planned photography time. And then I would take about 8 to 10 pictures at the interval of about 20 minutes each. And at the end of it, I wanted to come back and ensure that what I set out to do, which was to capture all the monasteries along the way, was done. As a photographer, the starting point of any photographs is really honing on your composition skills. We've already talked about the pre-visualization. This is the part where you kind of have some ideas in your mind and thoughts that you want to put into execution. Now think of composition as similar to, if you want to construct a house. There are certain elements that always goes in constructing a house. These are cement, bricks, mortar, maybe iron rods, and a whole lot of things. What you do with all of these components will differ. The house that will come out at the end of the day will be different because the way you've treated all of these material is going to be different. That's how composition works in art and photography. So there are various elements that we use in photography. These could be things like lines, textures, shapes, colors, and then you kind of figure out what your subject is going to be. This is the central character of your imagery or your art. Then you have a very distinct foreground, middle ground, background. You have to take care of all of that coming together. And then you put all of that together using certain rules in photography and art that allows you to get your viewers' attention to the main or an important part of your frame, which is your subject, and hopefully keep them there. Now the problem is, if you've not really understood the concepts around all of these, then you're going to approach photography more intuitively. So it is always about what looks good to your eyes. And because it makes things subjective, what you will see is that you may have 1 or 2 hits, but overall, the consistency in your art and photography is something that you will struggle with. Now, in my opinion, a good artist is somebody who consistently creates art. it's not like law of average. You don't take 100 frames and then say that I have 2 good frames and therefore I'm a good photographer or an artist. What you're striving to do is, if you're taking 100 frames, you're struggling to keep the 10 out of them because 90, 95 of them are actually good. And that to me is somebody who's a good artist or a photographer, somebody who consistently does that. And to do that, you have to really understand this whole pillar on composition. So some of the tips that I can share with you that I pay attention to while composing my images are things like sense of depth. Now this is something which means that you want your viewer's attention to kind of explore through the various layers and various elements that are present in your frame or in your art. And therefore the objective is that while they're scrolling your work on their Insta feed or Facebook feed, they stop and they look at your image or your art and they spend time finding out new elements, finding out new things. And that's what I call depth. So it's not very unidimensional 2D kind of a thing. It's something which has multiple elements and they kind of go into it. Second thing I look at is the flow of light. What direction the light is flowing. What is the intensity of the light? Where are the shadows? Where are the highlights? One of the mistakes that amateurs make in their strive for photography is that they want to show all the details and the highlights and all the details in the shadows. There's a reason why shadows are kept in the dark, right? Because it gives you the separation. The separation then adds to the point 1, which is create a sense of depth. The third thing I look out for is color harmony. In nature, all colors exist in perfect balance. You will never see a scene and say that this yellow or this green in the nature is out of place. Just doesn't happen. But in art, in a lot of art and in a lot of photographs, colors sometimes stick out. The balance and the harmony doesn't exist. One of my favorite example is that there are at least 100 shades of the greens. In a tree, the kind of leaves that you will see, the shades of greens that you see in the leaves are going to be varying. When you bring that image out for post-processing, you have to ensure that everything is in perfect balance. Timing. Timing is all about really being at the right place at the right time. Something which is taken 5 minutes before time or something which is taken 5 minutes after the right time might have different and profound impact. If you miss the right sunlight, if you miss the right sunset, your image is probably not going to have the impact that you intended to have. And then strong subject. I have stressed about this in the past as well. Subject is something which is, we know that it's a very key, important aspect of your photography, but it is something that you have to really pay attention to. Subject is where everything leads to and then leads out of. It's not something that is an element present in your picture or art. It's something, it is there for a reason. It makes people connect with it, and it makes you to either think or believe or see or feel something out of that. What every photographer and artist should realize is that craft takes time to perfect, all right? And it takes time to learn. So once you are on the journey of learning and picking up your craft, you have to also figure out a way to practice and process and kind of imbibe it. Now in the summary, let me just help you out with 3 tips that I think helps you or might help you in the process of your visualization and composition skill. So this is what I have done for over 2 decades in terms of improving my own sense of visualization and composition. So every time I see a good picture or an art, there are 3 questions that I ask myself. Question 1, what is it I like about that art or photograph? This is where I speak it out loud. So for example, I look at a picture and I say, oh, I love the way the colors are working out, or the balance is working out. Or I love the way the image is pulling me into the image. I love the way there's a long exposure used, or a subject is talking. Second thing I ask myself is, what is it I don't like about the image or the art? This is not when I'm trying to be a critique. I am not going to go and write this on the artist or photographer's feed. This is for me to internalize. And while everybody does the best work in their art and photograph, there are always point of views to how we interpret and see art. So these are things that I personally may or may not like about something. So these are things that I might say that, maybe I would have liked this to be like that, or like that to be like this, and so on and so forth. So this is where I speak out loud, what are the things that I don't like about an art or a photograph. And then finally, the third part, which is, if I had to do the same thing, or if I had to recreate the same image, what would I do differently? This is where I push myself to be creative. This is where I push myself to not follow the herd. So if someone has shot a certain picture of Taj Mahal or Eiffel Tower that I was talking about, I would always do this homework before, saying, what would I do different? And that is something I do before I even get down to executing the shot. Hopefully these 3 tips will help you in bettering your own sense of visualization and composition. Photography for me is a 2-part process. In the first part is when I'm outside on the field. This is the part where I'm exploring, I'm pushing boundaries, I'm searching, I'm looking for new things to do. It is also the time when I'm working with my hardware, my cameras, my lenses, my tripod, my filters. And the second and equally important part is where I bring all that I have captured outside back to my studio. So these are the raw files, and I work with software like Lightroom, Photoshop, Adobe Camera Raw to finally process those images and give it the final look that you see. So this is the part about the post-processing that we'll talk about next. Post-processing is not about if you should do it. It is all about how you should do it. Think about it this way. Camera is a mechanical device to really record the data. It will record the data as you have inputted or set the camera for. A human eye has a dynamic range of up to 25 to 26, whereas the best case scenario, your camera has a dynamic range of anything between 12 to 15. So there's a whole lot of spectrum of data and color that is not really captured by camera in its native form. And that's the part that you have to kind of figure out and understand how to adjust later during the post-processing. So in its most basic form, it includes fixing your highlights, shadows, contrasts, saturations, even sharpness, I would say. But then it goes on to really help you create what I call, or I keep saying about, a visual experience that allows your viewers to see the final output of the image that you have shot out in the field. So let me show you this image that I shot in Gulmarg in Kashmir. Now the way I have composed this and the way I visualized this was that there were beautiful lupins and greeneries in front of me, and the hour of the day was sunset. Sun had not set completely, and therefore I wanted to, make sure that the sun rays or the rays of the suns are visible in the frame. So I used one of these huts that is available in Gulmarg. There is a church there, and next to the churches are these small huts that they've made. So I used the hut to kind of shield the sun, just enough to have the starburst and sunburst come out of it. The height of the hut corresponds on the visual weight on the right side with the lupins which kind of come out. So it balances this. Otherwise, if the lupins were down and the hut was up, you would have an image which kind of leans on or twists onto to the left side of the frame. Of course, the focal length that I've chosen and the aperture that I've chosen has allowed me to keep everything from my immediate foreground to all the way everything in the background dark. The image was deliberately shot underexposed so that my highlights were protected, that the texture of the clouds in the skies were visible, and that's what I attempted to execute while I was shooting. And then I will use this image now to process this. So one of the ways of creating a niche for yourself as an artist is to really understand and personalize your art. That could be photography, it could be art. Now, there are 2 things to the art and photography. One is the method. This is everything to do with the technical aspect of the craft. So this is about understanding the camera, understanding compositions, understanding all the rules. And the second part is really the personality. This is where you put yourself through to your audience through the media or the medium of your art and photography. There are various ways to personalize your photography and create that personality. Just to give you kind of an example, you'll be able to pick out a person's art without even looking at their signature or their name, because a certain kind of art is associated to them. It could be the way they choose their subject, which is consistent through all their art and photography. It could be the choice of lens that they use for most of their work. For example, my initial works were all with wide-angle lens. I rarely shot anything with the mid-tele or the tele lenses. So it was synonymous with my kind of work. It could be the kind of color palette that you choose. For example, I usually shoot the sunrises and sunsets. So my work is laced with a lot of colors. It could also be the tone of work you do. A lot of artists or photographers stick to a certain tone in all their work. So you have to understand that one without the other doesn't really complete and create your own unique perspective in your art and photography. So we have discussed a lot of things in my masterclass today, and I can continue this for next few hours. But let me summarize all of that we have discussed in 3 key points that I hope you can take away from this masterclass. Point number 1, the key pillar or the key tenet in photography and art is the art of composition. You have to really understand what goes into composing. Not so much intuitive, but more methodical, more scientific approach to it. 2, planning is everything. Leave as little as you can to the chance. De-risk everything that you do not have a control over. From visualization to selecting the place that you want to shoot, to selecting the weather that you want to shoot in, all of that, plan that out. Because when you're out in the field, you want to focus on the only thing that matters to you then, which is executing or taking pictures. And 3, learn the craft, master the skill. That's the part where I talk about the method. So learn the method, and then bring in your own personality to personalize your art and photography. Because at the end of the day, people want to relate with you and your art through you. It has to be personalized to you. The competition is not with other photographers and artists. Your competition is with yourself. The idea is not to get more likes in the social platform, but it is for you to push your boundaries, discover new horizons, find new places. I can't wait to see the art that you create. So go out there, push your boundaries, and create the art, and send us your entries.